The teenage brain is very interesting. A friend once said to me, I'm something of a storyteller. So today I'll play to my strengths by telling you a couple of those. A few months ago, I was lucky enough to attend an event much like this one, where a young man called Joshua stood where I'm standing and blew the room away, sharing his story about life with his sister, Charlotte. Joshua spoke of his resolute desire to remain positive, despite the challenges he faced as a full-time carer for someone with complex medical needs. Joshua is 14 years old. A subsequent speaker, Madison, then talked to us about navigating life as a WA athlete competing at a national level and navigating life after high school. Madison has cerebral palsy. She challenged us on our perceptions of disability and inclusion. Madison is 19 years old. Don't tell me teenagers aren't awesome or that they don't have the capacity to be awesome. I've been very lucky in my work to work with teenagers from across the globe, from schooling sectors to social sectors, from detention centres to sporting centres. In my current job, which I often describe as the best job in the world, I work with many young people, mostly teenagers, who've made the call they want to become teachers themselves. I'm also the proud mother of 3 glorious teenage children. So between that and my research, I know a little bit about how their brain works, and knowing that helps other things make much more sense. So firstly, we know that the adolescent brain is fully physically formed for girls around the age of 12, and for boys it's 14. But this is when the other interesting work starts, and something called pruning starts to take place. And the best way I can describe pruning for you is I want you to imagine roses in springtime. They're beautiful, right? They're full, they're blooming, they're glorious when you walk past, they even smell amazing. But a few weeks later, you can walk back past and they've been savagely hacked back. They've been pruned, they look forlorn, they look a bit sad. But then the weeks and the seasons roll by and spring comes again and those roses are back blooming. Well, that's pretty much what happens to the adolescent brain during those years. Now, alongside this pruning, where again, the brain loses a lot of its grey matter, sort of a use it or lose it situation, something really interesting in parallel is taking place. Your brain is rewiring itself. And this rewiring process continues to take place until you're 23 years of age. This process, myelination or rewiring, is something that is responsible for the neuronal pathways of your brain setting themselves up for success. Now, alongside this pruning and rewiring, there are 2 little glands located deep within the recesses towards the back of your brain, known as the amygdala. Now, these 2 little almond-shaped glands are responsible for our emotional reactions to things. Has anyone here had a really bad breakup with someone? Or a terrible fight? And you are never, ever speaking to that person ever again. In fact, fate worse than death, you've blocked them on all your social media platforms. And a few days and weeks can go by and you might be out doing your errands or living your best life, and suddenly your heart will start to race or your stomach clenches or your palms start to sweat. And it might take you a couple of seconds, but then you recognise the enemy. And that's because your amygdala is responsible for facial recognition, and it puts you subconsciously into a fear-based response before you've even consciously recognised that person. Now, your amygdala are responsible for a lot of your emotional reactions to things, and they are on fire during the adolescent years. Alongside this, the sensible part of your brain, which is located here, known as your prefrontal cortex, is still working to come fully online during this time period. So it means that the part of you that regulates your decisions and helps you to make, as a parent, what I like to call good ones, is yet to be working fully yet. So what does this mean for adolescents in particular when it comes to things like tests or stress or anxiety? Well, here is where I have another story for you. A few weeks ago, I was driving into work and my phone rang. And I saw that the call was from one of my favourite humans in the world, my eldest son, Joe. So I took it. The conversation went something like this. Me. Hey Joe, what's up? Hey Mum, please don't freak out. Me, what's happened? Can't recall the specific words of that conversation, but the highlights were car accident, ambulance, police, hospital. I managed to locate where he was, and then the phone dropped out. The drive there is also a bit of a blur. I remember hitting the button on my playlist, trying to find a song, any song. There's no song for this. I arrived at the scene, which was pretty much as bad as my fevered imagination had gone, and there was ambulances, tow trucks. The cars involved looked like they'd been through a sandwich press. And those moments of trying to find my son. I located him in an ambulance, prone, blood seeping from the bandages. I'd like to sidebar this by saying Joe is okay, and that the only physical scars from this accident are some pretty impressive gashes on his knuckles. He reassures me, they give me main character vibes, Mum. So all good. I should also note that in recounting that story, many people have said to me, often in a fairly patronising tone, oh, but your son's a P-plater, isn't he? Yeah, he is. He didn't cause the accident. It was someone more my vintage, shall we say, than his. Because it's not always the teenager, you see. The thing I vividly recall from this scene is how amazing the first responders were. From the police officers who were calmly interviewing the witnesses, the ambulance officers who were looking after the people who were injured at the scene, the tow truck driver who reassured me that I would never have to see that car again and redirected all the traffic, and the amazing nurse who was driving home from night shift and had pulled over to prop my son and his best mate up against a pole to keep their necks secure until the ambulance arrived. These first responders had been trained in how to manage this scenario. They'd been tried and tested. They knew exactly what to do. And that's a big part of the reason why we have tests. Tests aren't fun. They're uncomfortable. Life is filled with them. Whether you are an apprentice walking onto a building site for the first time or dealing with a really grumpy customer in the retail sector, our lives are filled with tests. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, I should tell you I know a little bit about school-based tests. I am part of the team that is responsible for the original conception of a particularly unpopular national standardised test known as NAPLAN. And I know a little bit about ensuring the validity and rigour of those processes. And the NAPLAN test, when it was originally devised, was there simply to give us a snapshot of literacy and numeracy levels across Australia. Just as an FYI, the NAPLAN test is the equivalent of a Snapchat streak. If you really want to know how you're doing in school, you should talk to the person who knows you best, your teacher. But the other reason we have these national-based tests, these literacy and numeracy-based tests, is because it's actually really important that you are literate and numerate when you leave school. Because if we know that the amygdala remember those 2 almonds I talked about before, are responsible for a lot of our emotional reactions to things, it means that we need to know that you can make sensible, considered, informed decisions when you leave school. Case in point, sometimes when you finish school, the bank of mum and dad or your caregiver cuts off the funding to the mobile phone. And we want to know that when you go into a mobile phone store to take out your first mobile phone plan, that you are literate enough to read the contract and know how long you're signing up for, or equally, that you're not going to get caught up in the first 6 weeks free or that super cute mobile phone cover they're throwing in for free. That you are literate and numerate enough to be able to calculate the actual cost of those items to you. I'm less interested in having a conversation with you around study and managing those things, and more in supporting your brain in the process of tackling them. Less the what and more the how. It's my experience as a parent that one question raises the hackles of my teenagers faster than anything else. And that is, why aren't you studying? Instead, a better question is, how are you supporting your brain in this process? And I'd like to say this acronym that I'm introducing to you is a surefire way to support your brain's neural pathways, which again, developing until you're 23 years of age. And this is where I'd like to talk to you about DOSE, D-O-S-E. Now, the first part of my acronym is dopamine. We're all familiar with dopamine, you know, it's that reward-based one. Who was thrilled earlier when the B-reel went off? And you got to take a photo of something recently cool today, yeah? Made a change probably from the usual ones. Now, my daughter Isabella, she's 18 years old, and she is an expert when it comes to Snapchat. In fact, I think she stands at the top of the league tables, if there is such a thing, of Snapchat streaks of her forehead, ranging in about the 300,000 or 400,000, I believe, at this stage. But she also knows when it comes to study that she needs to knuckle down and do her work. So when it comes to getting dopamine for her brain, she writes her own prescription through one simple strategy. She puts her phone in the cupboard for 15 minutes because, again, the science tells us we really only concentrate effectively in 15-minute blocks. And after that, it starts to become a bit of a trek. So her phone goes in the cupboard, she's focused for 15 minutes, the alarm goes off, and boom, that right there is her dopamine surge. She's rewritten the prescription to get it for herself rather than relying on her phone to give it to her. The next part of the acronym is oxytocin. Now, we're all familiar with oxytocin. That's the one we get through, well, let's just say Olaf the Snowman's warm hugs. I'm not suggesting you leave here and go and start hugging random strangers. You might get into trouble if you try that. But what I am recommending is daily doses of oxytocin through those rarely given but warmly received hugs to your parents and caregivers. You'll get an oxytocin surge. That's supporting your brain's neural pathways. Your parents and caregivers are surprised. Everyone's a winner. The third part of this is serotonin. Now, we're familiar with serotonin because it's our mood stabiliser. And for adolescents, I often feel you get a bit of a double whammy because your amygdala are firing off, and at the same time, your serotonin, which is your mood stabiliser, does this during the adolescent years. Drops off a cliff. So you probably recall when you were little, you would be up with the larks at 6 a.m, ready to start your day, even if those who loved you weren't. Now, if you were asked to get up at 6 a.m, I imagine that request would be less well received. And that's not you, that's your serotonin levels, because, as I said before, they drop off a cliff during the adolescent years. They stabilise once you're fully into adulthood, but it's actually not you, it's your brain So a simple way to access serotonin is through sunshine. 15 minutes of direct sunshine. Wear sunscreen, kids. The final part of the acronym here is your endorphins. Now, we know we get endorphins through exercise, and the good thing about endorphins is they are like painkillers for your brain, all right? They act as an analgesic. So weirdly enough, it's going to make you feel better, even though sometimes it can feel like a counterintuitive process. I'm not here to write you an exercise program. I like CrossFit. You might like rowing. You might like tennis. You might like netball. You might like running. We all like different things. But the key thing is to find something and consistently do it, because those endorphins are looking after your brain and helping it in this critical period of development. Now, whether you are a bit like me and 6 weeks out from the due date of a test or exam, that anxiety starts to creep in, or you might suffer from a condition known as paralysis by analysis. You know it's there, but you're still not going to do anything about it. Or you might be like my 15-year-old son, Liam, who on the morning of a major topic test will wander out of the bedroom about half an hour before school starts and say to me, "I suppose I should do some study today, Mum." Irrespective of where you're at, the key thing here is not how much study you've got to do, but how can I support my brain in doing those things? So next time a due date's coming up, instead of what study have I got to do, ask a different question. Have I given my brain its dose today?